Member for Red Deer Lacombe.
It's mind-boggling that this Prime Minister thinks that gangsters who use guns on our streets don't deserve jail time. Conservatives know for a fact that law-abiding firearms owners are amongst the least likely people to commit an offense with a firearm. The original long gun registry was a billion-dollar boondoggle that did nothing to enhance public safety. This new Liberal backdoor registry won't either. Why won't this government focus on criminals and smugglers and leave law-abiding Canadians alone?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, coming out of the events last weekend in Buffalo and seeing this country suffer from numerous tragedies involving gun violence, we took the extraordinary step of banning AR-15s because they're designed to do one thing, and that is to kill people, Mr. Speaker. We've banned those assault rifles, and now we're committed to buying them back. Our plan was backed by the Canadian Association of the Chiefs of Police. What's the Conservatives' plan, Mr. Speaker? To make those AR-15s legal again. Shocking, Mr. Speaker. On this side, we'll continue to make sure that we take the steps that are necessary to keep Canadians safe.
The Honourable Member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, a database with your personal information attached to a unique identifying number, attached to a serial number of a firearm, and administered by the firearms registrar is a gun registry. We know the Prime Minister doesn't think much about Canadians who support legal firearms ownership, but we aren't fools. What is foolish is gutting penalties for criminals who steal firearms, possess stolen firearms, traffic in firearms, or smuggle firearms. Can the Prime Minister explain why he has such a vendetta against target shooters in Estevan while he lets gun-wielding criminals run free in ridings his backbenchers represent?
Here, here. The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Speaker, just last week we introduced a stronger ID verification for gun purchases and require businesses to keep records of gun sales, which they are already doing, Mr. Speaker. We've heard from some of those businesses who say this is common sense. Now police will be able to better investigate fraud and locate criminals who steal or try to engage in straw purchasing, which is a legitimate concern. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives can spin all they want, but Canadians see through it because they have no credibility when it comes to fighting against gun crime.
Are we ready? L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, 3 shootings took place in Laval last week. A man was shot in broad daylight in Montreal. Laval police say the criminals are impulsive and random. And what's the Liberal government doing about it? They're proposing to repeal mandatory minimum sentences for gun possession offences with Bill C-5. The Liberal approach is to allow armed criminals to keep walking the streets. Can anyone explain to the Prime Minister that his approach is irresponsible and only makes the situation more dangerous than it already was? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, those who commit serious offences are still liable to serious penalties.
Receive serious sentences, Mr. Speaker. Our bill is about getting rid of the failed policies that filled our prisons with low-risk, first-time offenders who needed help, not to be put in jail. These failed policies do not deter crime, did not keep us safe. They target the vulnerable and racialized Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. My colleague should say that to the Laval Chief of Police, who says these people who are willing to do this are very criminalized. No matter how idealistic we are, they won't stop when they get out of jail. Another testimony, my wife is very nervous and scared. You can't go outside anymore. My daughter was lucky, but next time, who knows, with stray bullets? So the Liberals want to leave these criminals on the streets with C-5. Why is the Prime Minister putting criminals ahead of victims? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, with all due respect to my colleague, that's not true. We have a solid plan to prevent firearms from falling into the hands of criminals. We have stricter controls for background checks. What did the Conservatives do? They voted against it. We put $350 into policing and to controlling arms trafficking at the border. What did the Conservatives do? They opposed it. It's unacceptable, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, gang shootings are on the rise. There were 3 in Laval last week alone. The Quebec Association of Chiefs of Police is opposed to Bill C-5, and for good reason. In addition, the Montreal Police Service informs us that a firearm event has occurred every 2 days since the beginning of 2022. So if I understand correctly, this Prime Minister only takes the advice of experts when it suits him. The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, I agree with my colleague. There have been a number of tragedies involving firearms, and that's precisely why we've taken concrete action. Last year, the Association of Chiefs of Police reported a record number of cases, but that's thanks to the investments the federal government has made at the border. What did the Conservatives do? They voted against that investment. It makes no sense. The honourable member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the minister is mixing 2 files up. When we're talking about C-5, that's the bill that is going to eliminate mandatory minimums for robbery with a firearm, trafficking, and discharging a firearm with intent. So street gangs are thrilled with this, and they really don't care about anyone. Can they stop talking about the border and talk about the firearms problem? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Those who commit serious offences will continue to receive serious sentences. And let's not get this confused. Our bill is about getting rid of the failed policies that filled our prisons with low-risk, first-time offenders who needed help not to be put in jail. These failed policies did not deter crime, did not keep us safe. They targeted the vulnerable and racialized Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Fundy Royal.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's Victims and Survivors of Crime Week, but the Liberals refuse to do even the bare minimum to support them. This government has abandoned the responsibility of victims of crime, but they remain champions of their friends, the criminals. The Liberals' Bill C-5 will mean lighter sentences for violent gun crimes, and that offenders charged with human trafficking and sexual assault will be able to serve their time from the comfort of their own homes. Wow. Why won't the Liberals provide the same sense of security to victims and survivors of crime?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to have this opportunity to respond to this question again. I want to be very clear. Those who commit serious offences will continue to receive serious sentences. Our bill is about getting rid of the failed policies that filled our prisons with low-risk, first-time offenders who needed help, not to be put in jail. These failed policies did not deter crime, did not keep us safe. They target the most vulnerable and racialized Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, the fact is violent crime and gun crime have gone up significantly. Gangs and criminals are running rampant in our streets. Canadians are seeing it with their own eyes on the news every day. And the Liberal response to this, Mr. Speaker, on one hand, they're eliminating mandatory prison time for criminals who commit dangerous crimes with guns, and on the other hand, they're doubling down on restrictions for licensed, trained, vetted, law-abiding Canadians with a new backdoor registry that will do nothing to deal with the real problem, which is gun smuggling and gang activity in our cities, Mr. Speaker. When will the Liberals start focusing on the real problem, Mr. Speaker?
That we invest in our communities, Mr. Speaker, so that we can prevent gun crime from occurring in the first place. The Conservatives are weak on all of those measures, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's targeting of law-abiding firearms owners is actually making our country less safe. Since becoming Prime Minister, we have seen an increase in gang-related homicides committed with firearms and a decrease in penalties for those convicted of gun crimes. Instead of going after the bad guys, he's going to spend limited taxpayer dollars to rebuild the Liberal long gun registry that goes after the good guys. Why does the Prime Minister continue to target law-abiding Canadians instead of criminals?
Good job. The Honourable for Medicine Hat, Carson Warner.
Mr. Speaker, this Liberal government's ideological failure on firearms and public safety continues. Their misguided targeting of law-abiding and legal gun owners is now focused on the implementation of another attempt at a gun registry rather than on criminals who obtain firearms illegally and they're smuggled into this country to kill on our streets. This government has shifted from their self-proclaimed evidence-based decision-making to decision-based evidence-making. When will the minister finally wake up to the fact that his failures are costing Canadians lives?
I'll get to the minister in a moment. The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, with
order. It's going to be a long question period today. I mean, we're only on number 14 here, guys. Number 15. All right. The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, with respect, I've visited my honourable colleagues' riding. I've met with the law-abiding shooters and hunters, and we have great respect for those individuals because we know that they value safety. The measures we've introduced are common sense. They're about making sure that guns don't fall into the hands of the wrong people, including criminals, Mr. Speaker. The measures we've introduced on this side of the House ensure that AR-15s have no place in our communities. The measures that we've introduced, Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House are to invest in communities to prevent gun crime from occurring in the first place. I wish my honourable colleague would support those measures. It's the right thing to do.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, the police must be given the means to act against the gang war that is raging in the Greater Montreal region. Yesterday, I asked the Minister if he was going to create a registry of criminal organisations to facilitate the arrest of gang members. The Minister responded that the short answer was yes, but without any elaboration. Mr. Speaker, today we are asking for a longer answer. Will he indeed create a registry of criminal organisations, and if so, when? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, we have the tools and we have granted the tools to policing bodies and law and order in order to fight against street gangs. We will continue to make investments in order to support our police forces. In Quebec, for example, I've had many very constructive conversations with my counterparts in Quebec, Minister Guilbeault, Mayor Plante, Mayor Marchand, and we will continue this important work in collaboration with Quebec. The Honourable Member for Avignon-le-Métis, Métan-Metapédia. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Minister opened the door. Today he seems to be closing it. Does he not see that there is a gang war in Montreal? The police want a free hand to do their job. They want to be able to make arrests, and that is what the Criminal Organisation Registry would make possible. It would make it possible to arrest any member of an officially recognised gang, which is a good incentive for the criminals to calm a bit down. Why, after all the shootings in recent months, is the Minister still reluctant to set up a registry of criminal organisations? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, there are laws to charge organised crime. There are tools to support the excellent work done by policing bodies to investigate in the field, to reassure everyone that we can protect public safety. On that front, we will continue with a global strategy in order to fight against armed violence, and that is work that we will do together with the Bloc Québécois and all other MPs in this House. Thank you very much.